After taking a census of the tribes of Israel and a separate census of the Levium, last week's parsha described the division of labor among the Levite families, beginning with the family of Kahat. This week's parsha, Naso, continues that theme by assigning responsibilities to the remaining Levite families. But then the Torah shifts. Before moving on to the seemingly unrelated topics of Sota and Nazir, the Torah pauses to discuss a different set of laws. The requirement that certain individuals, a Metzora, a Zav, or someone who has become impure through contact with the dead, must leave the encampment and may not remain within it. God is emphatic about this. Why must they leave? With the completion of the Mishkan, God's presence can now rest upon the camp. But that could happen only if the camp maintained a certain level of holiness. And that meant that those who were ritually impure could not remain inside. The Torah explains that they must leave so that they do not defile the camp in which God's presence dwells. This raises an interesting question. What exactly counted as the camp such that someone could leave it when it required? The Sifri explains that the Israelite camp was arranged in 3 concentric circles. At the very center was the Machaneh Shechinah, the place where God's presence was manifest, the Mishkan and its immediate surroundings. Surrounding that was the camp of the Levium. And around both of those was the outermost circle, the camp of the 12 tribes known as Machaneh Yisrael. The Gemara in Pesachim 76a notes that although the Torah lists all 3 types of impurity in a single verse, not all impurities are created equal. In fact, there are 3 distinct categories. The first category, which includes impurity from contact with the dead, requires a person to leave or refrain from entering the area where the divine presence is most intensely manifest. In the wilderness, this meant the Mishkan itself. In the land of Israel, the Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah corresponds to the Azara of the Beit HaMikdash. The second category, which includes the impurity of a Zav, is more stringent. Someone in this state must stay out of the Levites' camp entirely. In the desert, this was the area surrounding the Mishkan. In the land, Bamidbar Rabbah corresponds to the entire Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount. The third category, the impurity of Tzarat, is the most severe. A Metzora must be sent out of the entire camp until he becomes pure again. In the desert, that meant leaving all 3 circles of the encampment. In the land of Israel, however, this did not mean exile from the country. Rather, it meant being barred from entering Yerushalayim, whose sanctity paralleled that of the Israelites' camp in the wilderness. This gradation seems counterintuitive. The level of impurity from contact with the dead is more severe than the impurity of Tzarat. Yet it is the Metzora who must leave all the camps, while someone who is impure through contact with the dead is restricted only from approaching the Mikdash. How can a less severe impurity result in a more extreme level of exclusion? The answer is that what causes a person to leave the camp is not the degree of impurity itself. In fact, the Midrash notes that the Torah in Vayikra teaches that God can dwell within the camp even when people are ritually impure. Rather, each level of exclusion corresponds to a deeper form of Chilul Hashem. Impurity from contact with the dead is serious, but death is a natural part of life. It happens to everyone, and it is not the result of wrongdoing. The impurity of a Zav, however, often stems from some lapse in personal conduct. But Tzarat comes specifically as a consequence of profoundly improper behavior. Each step represents a greater breakdown in holiness, and therefore requires a greater degree of separation. The holiness of the camp and the need to leave it revealed what the Torah considers most important. The deeper the breakdown in one's conduct toward other people, the further one had to step back from the center of holiness. The physical distance mirrored a person's inner state and showed what work was needed in order to come back. Shabbat Shalom.